So we tend to talk a lot about AI on this podcast, but honestly, none of the three of us are experts. But do you know two people who are experts? Two people who could probably bore you to death with all of their AI chat? Stefan and Joshua from our sponsors, PropTex. They are absolutely at the forefront of using AI to enhance real estate portal listings, and they're doing some other really cool stuff involving in listing furniture shopping. We're going to have Stefan on the podcast soon to talk about that. It's genuinely really interesting. If you're interested in learning a bit more about what PropTex does, head to PropTex, that's with 2x's.com, or hit the guys up on LinkedIn. Obviously, say that we sent you. Hello and welcome to the PPW podcast, bringing you news, views, and interviews from the world of real estate marketplaces and PropTech. Today, I am joined by Harvey. How are you, Harvey?
Very good, thank you, Ed. Enjoying my new apartment. Fixed out my Wi-Fi finally, so can't wait to do some good podcasting.
Fingers crossed. And Simon Baker, how are you, Simon?
I'm excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, today we've got a news roundup for you. We will start, guys, everybody listening, I'm sorry, we're talking about Zillow again, but this is quite a big deal.
You're not sorry. Come on. It's the endless source of great information to a large audience.
Okay, fair enough.
We're in the media game. We're in the media game. We need clickbait.
Speaking of the media game, this particular story has been covered in about 100 different media sources. Zillow is being sued by one of the country's largest brokerages. Harvey, why don't you fill us in?
Yeah, so morning, everyone. Clear cooperation policy, NAR, there's been a whole to-do about it. If you've been living under a rock the last few months, please do some research on online marketplaces. Let's fast forward to the present. Compass is one of the biggest brokerages in the US, and it's the biggest by sales volume. And it is suing Zillow for what it alleges is anti-competitive, monopolistic behavior thanks to its new listings ban. Zillow's listing ban is going to warn and then subsequently ban agents from publishing on Zillow if they don't upload a publicly marketed listing to the MLS within 24 hours of it going live. So Compass says Zillow is gatekeeping listings, basically. And Robert Refkin, the CEO of Compass, has said, imagine if Amazon banned every seller that offered a product on their own website first from publishing on Amazon. Wouldn't work.
Good analogy.
Good analogy. Redfin has also been named. Redfin and Zillow sort of on the same side of the singing from the same hymn sheet here. And I mean, we could go into this for hours, Ed. So I'll leave it there. But let's move on.
Okay, so Redfin's been named. I don't think it's been named as a defendant in the suit, but Redfin was named along with EXP. So what makes this really interesting for me is that you've got like two very distinct camps at this point. There aren't that many people left sitting on the fence here. So in the one camp, you've got Zillow, biggest real estate portal, Redfin, one of the bigger real estate kind of discovery sites and brokerages, and then you've got EXP, which is the largest by, so I think Compass is largest by sales volume and EXP is largest by number of transactions, all on the side of we want an open market where everybody gets access to all the listings. Then on the other side of the fence, you've got obviously Compass and you've got homes.com and there's, some other brokerages as well. Simon, could you contextualize for people out there, why does this really matter? Because it feels like it really matters, but perhaps if you're working at a portal in, let's say, Scandinavia, you're not fully aware, cognizant of why this is such a big deal in the US.
Yeah, so I think we when I think about it, why is it a big deal? It's a big deal because we have a supplier, Zillow, and an industry players going head to head about who has the right to control how business is done. Okay, and what we're seeing around the world at the moment is a number of these anti-competitive investigations. We talked the other day about what was happening in Australia. There's an anti-competitive investigation. I mean, there was a couple of other markets. I can't remember now which markets they were, but also South Africa came up, which I didn't realize was another one. And I think it's because what has happened is at its core, these websites, portals, have become very powerful. Powerful in that the consumer says, I want to go somewhere, I want to see everything for sale, and I want to go to them, and Zillow or REA or Rightmove have become the default go-to places. Now what's happening is that those default go-to places, which inherently historically have said nothing more than, I'm here, I've got all the listings, or all the listings that I can get my hands on, look at me, is now saying, no. Here are the rules by which you market. Now, if I'm selling a house and for whatever reason I want to try an off-market sale first, maybe I've got in my Rolodex, and for Harvey, for you in particular, a Rolodex is a very old piece of physical technology.
Don't patronize me,
where
Simon. Don't
where you
patronize
put these things, they're called business cards. You put them in there and you sort of go around. Okay. And now these Rolodexes, often agents have a list of buyers for whatever reason for a market, and they're just waiting for the right house to come up. Now, instead of going and broadcasting to everyone, they may just want to go and have a one-on-one conversation or a series of these conversations before doing it. Well, they can't do it until they've got the mandate to sell the house. So why can't they then be allowed to go and have these conversations? Oh, it didn't work out. We couldn't get to a price. I'm now going to market more broadly. That, from an agent perspective, is a legitimate business model for them to pursue what they think is in the best interests of the home seller. So for a portal to say, no, you can't do that. You must, as soon as it's available, put it on me. And if you don't, you can never put it on me, I think becomes problematic, especially when you as the portal are reliant on that customer for your income. It makes no sense. Okay? It makes absolutely no sense at all. And I think what this is also symbolic of is the highly litigious US environment where everyone gets sued on everything. And I was just on another call with some guys in Asia talking about having been sued by a company out of the US, a very large company, purely because they had some news articles on their website. Okay. And it's very, very litigious, so I think the best outcome, the best outcome is to allow everyone to operate the way they want to operate. As soon as you start putting rules in to say how you must operate, and those rules are determined not for like a safety reason or something else, but purely because you're worried that people will market around you or that you won't have all the listings or whatever, to me doesn't bode well for an industry if that becomes okay behavior.
Yeah. So to kind of contextualize this a little bit more, when we're talking about these private listing networks, we are still talking about a very small percentage of all the listings that Zillow might have. So to give Mike Del Prete, who we had on recently, his dues, he's done the research here. Compass exclusive inventory, according to Mike Del Prete, was around, I'm looking at it now, something like 9,000 listings at the end of March. So it's probably gone up since then. But we're talking
this is nationally.
Yeah, we're talking about a very small percentage of all the listings that are on Zillow, right? So this is much more of a ideological and kind of a battle for like what's going to happen in the future, rather than a battle for those 9,000 listings that right now are in its private inventory.
Yeah. Well, the only, if you think about who's the winner out of this, okay, is Zillow going to come off being more loved by the industry? Probably not. Okay. Will other players, now Realtor.com, I assume you can do whatever you want because it's attached to the MLSs. And
yeah, we'll come to that. We'll come to that because there's been
and then Homes.com is probably best position because they've come out and saying you're listing your lead. And so could you imagine Homes.com now saying you're listing your lead, but only if you put it up in 24 hours from, I got to think that's sort of.
Homes have already Andy Florence has already come out and been obviously characteristically outspoken about it and said, absolutely what Zillow is doing is X, Y, and Z. I can't remember what he actually said, and I don't want to get sued by him, so I won't I won't misquote him, but he's come out strongly in favor of the Compass side of things.
Ed,
Speaking
could
Sorry,
I
go on, yeah.
could I add just one thing quickly? Going back to the Compass exclusive inventory numbers, because I was looking at the same graph as you this morning, and even though there were 9,000 listings in March, there were only 3,000 listings in like August last year. So Compass's exclusive inventory is actually going up very, very quickly. So there is a certain business element of it where Compass wants as many exclusive listings as possible. So just to put into context, that 9,000 listings, that's not a steady number that's been the case for the last 2-3 years. That's actually a new number that's come up from basically nothing, just 3,000 in the last 6-8 months alone. So just a little bit of context there.
Yeah, thanks. So as Simon mentioned there, what Realtor.com are saying in all of this, as Simon correctly pointed out, Realtor.com have to abide by what the NAR says. They can't just make up their own listing policy and, ban listings. Having said that, the CEO of Realtor.com, an Australian man actually, named Damien Eales, has come out with a pretty strongly worded statement or essay on the whole CCP private listings debate, with some pretty good quotes. Harvey, why don't you give us the flavor from what Damien Eales wrote?
Yeah, of course. So as you say, Realtor.com, essentially an industry-backed portal, therefore with clear cooperation policy. Realtor.com is always going to abide by those rules because it's essentially made those rules in the first place. Therefore, Damien Eales is unsurprisingly, if he's going to come out swinging, it's going to be in defense of the policy. The blog is very strongly worded, as you say. I'll give you a couple of quotes here. The first one is, selling a secret is no way to start a bidding war. He doesn't like brokerages. He doesn't like private marketplaces. And litigation from both sellers who feel shortchanged as well as buyers who claim they were selectively excluded. As you say, litigious culture in the US, and Damien Eales thinks that having exclusive listings is actually going to essentially be a stain on the industry, and they're going to wake up on the wrong part of the history books when we look back on it in 20-30 years saying we should never have created a private marketplace. It should have been an open marketplace where everyone had full visibility for all listings all the time. Meanwhile, Howard Hanna, another brokerage, we have some more quotes coming out of there. Hanna Holdings does not consider the clear cooperation policy binding, and accordingly, no Hanna Holdings affiliate or franchisee will adhere to the policy as a matter of course. So, a lot in there.
It's an incredibly controversial topic. LinkedIn's been really great the last few weeks of people really having an argument on there. Simon, I want to get you in here because Damien Eales, obviously, as we said, he's Australian. And in his essay, he's talking about his experience selling a house in Australia and how it was, selling a house in the US is basically a lot easier and better than selling a house in Australia. And essentially saying we don't want our system in the US to become like it is in places like Australia and the rest of the world. You have experience doing the same thing. How do you come down? Which side do you come down on this?
Okay, so quick overview. I've owned property in multiple markets, bought and sold. We're talking about Europe, US, and Australia, and multiple properties in each. And I think each market has its own pluses and minuses. I think to say one is better than the other, I think sort of oversimplifies things. So if I'm in the US and I've got a house there at the moment, when I eventually come to sell it, am I looking forward to paying 6% commission? Oh, okay. Now, if I had a house in Australia, or I'd probably pay 2% commission. And I think I don't have to spend as much on marketing as I may be requested to do by the real estate agent. But that I can negotiate from a position of knowledge. In the United Kingdom, I can pay my 1.25% commission. So define which is better. Well, it's easier to sell it in the United Kingdom where I'm going to have to pay 1.25% commission than 6%. And no matter how fast you sell it, do I really want to pay that extra 4 to 5% for speed? Because I probably might, if as long as the agent markets it properly and there's a legitimate group of buyers, I'll get a market price for it. At the end of the day, so I don't fully agree with the statement that it's all easier in the US. I think if you're running Realtor.com, you're going to say it's easier in the US. And if you're running, there's a little bit of, well, what's your current role and what you're currently doing. Therefore, you've got to be seen as supportive of that, because otherwise, your shareholder or your at least key influencer would not be happy. So you've got to look who's talking and who's making the comments to really get an understanding of how they view it all. My
The
view
way,
is,
the way I've interpreted, maybe not Damien Niels' comments, but some of the things I've seen on LinkedIn, the way I've kind of interpreted some comments is some people on the kind of Zillow side feel that this stand by compass is kind of the thin end of the wedge, which will eventually somehow lead to the erosion of the MLS system. And the MLS system is this great thing where, it means equal opportunity in housing in a lot of ways.
Everyone's a
Is
winner.
that a fair way of looking at it?
the whole MLS system was under the scrutiny of the US legal system. Now, I won't get all the facts right, but I know it was last year or the year before. I think I mentioned before, there's a great podcast done by the New York Times on it. Please have a listen. And the industry will, like everything in the US, and they're all over Washington, like a rash. They want to protect 6% commissions. They want to protect the role of the buyer's agent. They want to protect, the mechanism that has made many of them quite wealthy. Okay, because they always do. It's human nature, right? But the problem is that the best mechanism? Well, no. What happens if I got a house to sell? I know who the buyer is. I just want to employ an agent to help me do the process, just to take all the heavy lifting off my plate. Why am I paying 6%? Why am I going through a complete process? I mean, I have a house in just north of Miami. It's in an area where there's a limited supply. I know there's demand. I know that there's a queue of people who would like to buy in that area. I don't need to advertise far and wide to secure an outcome. But the system is forcing me to do it a certain way. Now, not all properties are identical. Now, you're selling one apartment out of 500 in a condominium development. Maybe you've got to go far and wide to find the right people, because maybe it's not a high demand area. But maybe you've got the soul. There's a place in Florida called Indian Creek Island. I think it's called Indian Creek Island. Jeff Bezos owns, I'm not on the island. Don't even think about that, right? Definitely not. But that island's got, I've boated around the outside of it. There's got maybe 50 properties, if that, with a golf course in the middle of it. There is a queue a mile long of human beings who want to buy a property there. Okay. You don't need to go to an agent. You just got to basically, say to your mates, I got a property for sale, who wants it? And then the word of mouth will do the job. Well, why can't we allow horses for courses, right? Where there's a need to do it a certain way, do it that way, whereas a need to do it a different way. I mean, I think we tend to want to treat everything vanilla, and we want it to be vanilla, and especially if it benefits a group of people, okay, over another group. So that's why I think we've got to be mindful of the US is an interesting case. But back to your very original question, why would someone in Sweden care? They probably shouldn't.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on. For two Englishmen and one Australian discussing the relative merits of the way the US market works. We'll move on. The other big piece of news this week was that Adevinta Spain is for sale. We kind of knew that already, but this has kind of been reported in a bit more depth and is expected to fetch $2 billion. Harvey, why don't you fill us in with a few more details?
Yeah, sure. As you say, this is a tale as old as time at this point. Adevinta has been selling stuff in anything that's not considered a core market, which for context, is Benelux, so Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. For the last 4 or 5 years, they were selling assets before I joined online marketplaces 3 years ago. When Permira and Blackstone made the purchase last year, it was about 14 billion. Is that
I think
correct?
it was 13 billion.
13. Well, okay, I gave them an extra billion there. Rumors of the Spain assets being up for sale came out pretty quickly. That there were clearly some internal sources sort of putting feelers out into the market. It looks like there have been some financial advisors brought in, including Goldman Sachs, and Spain's assets are apparently officially up for sale, and bids are expected to come in by mid-July. So, what's up for sale? And which horizontals are they in, and who's going to buy? So we have real estate, obviously. That's going to be Fotocasa and Habitaclia, two sort of challenger portals, essentially. In the automotive, we have Coches.com and Motos. And then
Coches.net, isn't it? I think
Coches.net,
Coches.com is
Coches.net, Motos.com,
an
I
important
think.
distinction because I think they're competitors.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. We also have Milanuncios for journalized classifieds, and we also have info jobs in recruitment. So we've got a couple of segments covered there. Spain is not a core market, despite being part of the company's biggest segment, and therefore there are going to be some interested buyers, and Idealista minority shareholder EQT might be one of them. And also we have another name, Hellman and Friedman, which might be interested, particularly in the automotive segment. Those are the core facts off the top. So Ed, back over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Simon, I kind of struggled to get my head around this a bit until yesterday. I decided if I'm struggling to get my head around it, I should investigate and write an article. So I spent yesterday doing the research and writing an article on the broader topic that I think is behind this news story. Why would a company like Adevinta want to sell a bunch of assets that were making a whole load of money? I think I'm apologies if I get this wrong. I think it was something like 130 million EBITDA last year for the whole Spanish assets. That could be wrong. I need to check that. Actually, that sounds too high. But the point is, they're all It's profitable. As a profitable business segment, why would you sell it?
So 130 could be right if they're trying to sell it for what do you call it?
2
2 billion. Okay. Now I think the reason you sell it is when you bought out Adevinta, you bought a whole bunch of assets. You had Distilled in Ireland, and that was sold pretty quickly, back to I think 50%.
Yeah, it was a joint
with
venture with the founders,
original
which I think
founders,
they
yeah.
sold back to the founders.
The Fallon brothers, and they've done a good deal there to do that. What I think comes down to is they've done the top to bottom analysis. They've worked out of all the assets, the top 4 or 5 are probably Kleinanzeigen in Germany, and there's a motoring site in Germany, and a few others, right? And they've said they're the ones that are going to be the as an investor, you always have those that you get your money back on, those you make a little bit on, and then there's a couple of hockey sticks that go ballistic that you invest in. I think they've probably said those 4 or 5 are the ones we're going to super focus on. You don't want to be distracted by all these other little businesses, so let's see if we can just move them on. And they may have done some macroeconomic analysis and said, look, the Spanish economy, it's good, but it's yes, it's making 130 odd million maybe, but we'll bank the 2 million. Now, are they making any money of that? I don't know. Maybe they're just getting their money back, but they'll put it away. Now, what I've heard is that it's being sold as in English we call it a job lot. All right, so you got to buy the lot rather than you can buy this asset but not those assets. That's why you're getting these PE firms.
Yeah, that was my next question. Why is it only PE firms? And I think you might have perhaps answered there.
Well, who is going to buy this stuff, right? You think about it. Idealistic can't. I mean, they've already got some potential issues with the competitive with the purchase of Kiero. We talked about that the other day, didn't we? I think we did. So then you go, well, who's number 2? Well, it's really Immobiliare with its Pisos, and and not number two, number three, because the number three would maybe want to buy the number two. So Immobiliare probably coming out of, if you think about the fund dynamics, right? You've got, Immobiliare strong in Italy, Idealista strong in Spain. Idealista goes aggressively into Italy with the purchase of Casa and I think a couple of others. Okay, becomes a super competitive number two, maybe equal number one, depending on who you talk to. So clearly, Immobiliare is going, wait a second, get out of here. You're not? Okay, I'm coming to Spain. So they own, what was it? They bought Pisos recently, and then they already had Indomio in the market. That's great, but that doesn't get you to number two. It gets you to be number three, right? So how do I become number two? Oh, I'll buy Photocasa and Habitaclia, and they got some software as well, I think, as well. So I'll buy them, put them all together. Now I've got equal, maybe I'm getting closer to being Idealista size in the Spanish market. Okay, oh, but wait, I've also got to buy the cars business, the jobs business, and the Milanuncios, the horizontal. I don't want them.
Not
And
worth the distraction, right?
Well, then I probably can't afford it. So I've got to get together with someone who wants the cars business. And from what I understand, the cars business and the horizontal sort of go hand in hand. Okay, so they probably go together. And then I got to find someone to buy the jobs business because I don't want to be left with that. So that's why you're getting PE firms, because PE firms have the capacity to go, you know what, I'll buy the lot. I actually really want the cars business. I'll then do a deal on the back end with Immobiliare. So they or to buy the
Or CoStar.
or CoStar, yeah. Every conversation I'm in, they always go or CoStar, right? Or CoStar, because they bought Domain and they bought.
You said that I'll
Market.
do a deal with Immobiliare with someone who with some confidence.
They would do, yeah. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah,
If you're a private equity firm, and you mentioned, right, Hellman Freeman, they're interested in the motoring asset, but
Correct.
you can't just buy the motoring asset. So you buy the lot, and you've got the financial capacity. Right, so you write the check for $2 billion, you buy the whole lot, you then have a back end deal already in play with the Immobiliare guys, where you then on sell Photocasa assets to them.
Okay. So you think
that to me is a potential scenario of what will happen.
Okay, potential scenario. I want to put you on the spot. Do you think that in 18 months' time, Pisos.com and Fotocasa will be owned by Immobiliare?
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
All right. I was exchanging emails with somebody who worked at Adevinta.
And I have no knowledge of this. Just this is
neither do
purely
I.
speculation for anyone listening. I have not spoken to anyone
Okay.
who is in a position of power or authority to make any of these decisions.
Okay. So we mentioned the Spanish competition authorities previously in relation to Idealista's acquisition of Quiero. And in response to us mentioning that, somebody who used to work at Adevinta, who did the deal for Adevinta to buy, I think it was Milanuncios and maybe one of the other assets, emailed me saying with the subject line Spanish competition authorities. And email was all about how stringent, how strict, how forensic the Spanish competition authorities are. This person said that I think it took them 18 months to get this deal over the line past the Spanish competition authorities. So it will be interesting to see if that scenario plays out.
Yes.
How long it will take.
Yeah, I think I think if you're the Spanish competition authority, let's play this out. This is an interesting one, right? You go, Idealista, you can't buy Fotocasa because that just concentrates power way too much. If they are as forensic, as they say. Now, are you better off having one Idealista and Pisos / Indomio and Photocasa / Habitaclia, both of which are relatively weak number twos and number threes is that better for competition versus Idealista and the other two merged? Because then you got two sort of gorillas belting the crap out of each other in a marketing sense, right? Versus a gorilla and two much smaller monkeys or something, right?
Yeah.
Little much smaller, and it
No,
just
it's a
doesn't
good
work.
point. It's a good point.
And I've got a feeling that the argument I would be making is, now you if you want to have true competition, you need to have another big guy in the room. So let's put these together to create that outcome in
Okay.
the process.
Another question I had about this. So in all of this, I have some sympathy for the ordinary people working at the assets of Adevinta in Spain. Somebody working at, for example, Habitaclia or Fotocasa. There's been a lot of change and disruption for them over the last 12 to 18 months. This is just another thing that they've got to worry about in the back of their mind. Even if you just work in IT, you're a developer, you do think about this as
Yeah,
you're
although
going about your work.
I think if I worked in IT and I was a developer, I'd be far more concerned about AI.
Okay, all right, different. Somebody else then. Somebody who works in human resources or somebody works in
Yep.
whatever, right? You do think about this.
Yes.
And there have been rumblings that, like, this staff's not very happy. How do you've been in charge of a lot of people at a big company like this. What do you say to them? Because you
Ooh.
can't say that much because you can't reveal details. And you also probably can't say something like your jobs are all safe. But you do sort of have to say something, I suppose.
I
What do
think
you say?
you need to be open. You need to be honest. You need to be transparent. Okay. And you need to reinforce that the more valuable you make yourself, the more likely you're going to still be here. Now, I would think if I was sitting in Pisos or Fotocasa, actually, no, Pisos is irrelevant here. If I was sitting in Fotocasa or the coaches.net or whatever, right? And I'm going, oh my God, ownership change. I would be going, well, there's two thoughts I'd have. One is, well, when a PE firm comes in, they're not doing it because they want to just maintain the status quo. They're doing it because they want to drive greater efficiency. But that's probably already happened, because when Adevinta was broken up and bought by Permira and Blackstone, they've already had to drive greater efficiency, and I think, as far as I hear, there's already been a number of layoffs and so on to get to that efficiency. You probably can't keep cutting to the bone, right? Eventually, you then become, you can't save yourself, can't save your way to market leadership. You actually have to invest to take on the market leader. So therefore, I would think that you're probably okay, right? Now if you take all the noise and the emotion and and just look at the facts are you're probably okay. Okay, then and you fortunately you're working in Spain, and you've got all the protections that the government affords you working in Spain, versus in the US where it's at will employment, which means the guy, someone walks in and goes, you and you, goodbye, and you go, what? And you go, yep, bye. Right? You're out the door in 30 seconds. So given all of that, I think you're okay. But the problem is the emotions. So the job of the CEO and the job of leadership in general is to help provide transparency so that everyone knows what's happening at all points in time, so that there's no making up of stories. That's the worst bit, right? If you say nothing, then people make up stories. And if they make up stories, they're never good stories, right? So you've got to remove the making up of stories. You be as transparent as you can, and you don't bullshit them. Don't bullshit your audience, because they can smell bullshit a mile away, right? They know, look, if you're telling me everything's super cool, don't worry. Yeah, it's like, you say, look, no, this is what's happening. This is the process. This is who's, this is who's engaged. This is, how they're thinking about it. Whatever. then the employee can make up their own mind. I'll stay for the journey. I'll see what happens. And if I do get made redundant, I'm going to get my, a nice payout at the end, but I'll have to find another job. Or they may voluntarily go, you know what, I've always wanted to do the startup or something else. So they can then make sure people got choice, right? And that's
Okay.
probably the best way to do it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, gents. Those are the two big stories that we've covered recently. Just as well that we're not monetizing the YouTube anymore because there was some swearing at the end there, but that's okay.
Was there?
Yeah.
Shit,
I
sorry.
It's all right. We stopped putting the ads on. All right, gents. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you on the next one.
Wait.
No,
I got
Well,
one other piece of business. Well, think about it. Actually, two other pieces of business. One is I had a good meeting yesterday with the guys at PropTex, and the reason I bring that up is we're going to do a podcast with them, and it's going to be about AI. But what is interesting in that meeting I had with the CEO Stefan Gunnarsson is that he talks about this. The meeting I had yesterday with him was he was talking to me about the speed of change in AI and how that's impacted his business and how it's impacting those businesses around him. And I thought that would be a very interesting topic for us to talk about because he's living it in terms of how, for example, Sora, the image manipulation models come along and how they've had to quickly embrace it and how they're thinking about positioning their business for the future. So I think that's a good conversation we'll have. In addition, we had a good conversation talking around how he is bringing together the furniture retail industry with the property marketplace industry, which
yeah, that is cool. That's what we try and mention in the ad reads a lot because that is genuinely cool.
and
Fascinating.
no one's done that before. And what that means is if I am looking at a house on, say, Scout 24, and I go, oh, I really like that house, but I need to imagine my existing furniture in that house. You can do that. Okay. Or I'm looking at a house and I don't like the furniture the person who's selling it has, but wouldn't it be great if I could put IKEA furniture in there or Roche Bobois or someone else? Okay. Press a button, bang. Now you've reimagined it in that sort of form. And then when you talk to Stefan and he goes, well, then what else can I do with this technology? So he's now no longer thinking about the coders in the background, doing all that image manipulation because that's sort of becoming
Becoming the norm.
more generically available. He's thinking about these use cases that are quite innovative, that are better for portals because they get not only greater engagement, but they can make money out of it because he's creating a pool of value to share with the portals. And then secondly, if you're a retailer and someone goes to your website, they're just going to see chair, sofa, whatever, right? It's just this list, and it's not in context, right? You want to see that sofa in your house to go, yeah, that's going to look really good, or I don't like how it looks. So then he said, well, why don't we create a widget that will work on any furniture retailer sites? And he said, there's 6 million furniture retailers on Shopify. 6 million. And he goes, well, if I create a widget that they can just shove on their website that will basically allow me as the person visiting the website to upload a picture of my room. So this room behind me, my son's bedroom. Okay. And I can then put the furniture that I'm looking at in that room all within 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's cool. It sounds like you might have given a bit of a spoiler for when we actually do the interview with Stefan, but that is genuinely really
that's
cool.
called a teaser.
It's a teaser.
That was long enough to be a spoiler, I'd say.
But to me, what it's symbolic of is that AI is moving so fast, but the use cases are getting more and more interesting.
Yeah.
And so it was the first thing. My second point was, please don't forget we have coming up in October our Property Portal Watch conference in Madrid. It's going to be a fantastic conference. Every morning I wake up and I've got another email I've got to answer about a speaker or about attendees. I think we'll have close to 400, if not more, C-level leaders from around the world who just want to share their thoughts and ideas about what's happening. AI is going to be an absolutely red hot topic
Yeah, that's true.
during
We've
that
got
conference.
a few speakers that we can't quite announce yet, but we've got some hopefully very exciting speakers.
Yeah, so register now. Go to www.ppweurope25.com, ppweurope25.com. Register now, get the best price, because given the demand, I'm going to put the prices up next week.
Yeah,
There we go.
you heard it here.
Get
All right, guys.
in there fast.
All right, see you on the next one.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye bye.